We're now into the sixth fundamental, the sixth tool in the toolbox. In the Big Ten, it's called the 5 questions. You used to call it the 4 questions, have cleaned it up, call it the 5 questions now. There are 5 questions about evangelism and discipleship. In terms of verse supports for this particular tool, this is a complicated one because each of the tools is one, and then you have something called 5 questions, which is like 5, but it's really one. It's one tool, and the tool is to ask 5 questions regularly. Evangelism, God who wants all men to be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. John 3:3, you must be born again. I quoted 1 Timothy there. 2 Peter 3:9, the Lord is not slow in keeping his promise. He's patient, not wanting anyone to perish. He doesn't want anyone to perish, and he wants all men to be saved. And in the mystery of God, not all are saved. Nonetheless, this is what he wants. He wants everyone to come to repentance. That's the evangelism burst support. He came to set the captives free. He came to reconcile. Clearly, we have lots of support for evangelism. And in discipleship, we have a verse we use as the direct verse, 2 Timothy 2:2. Paul to Timothy, the things you've heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, and trust a reliable man who will be able to teach others also. And so we have this depiction from the Gospels. We have Paul talking about it. We have Moses talking about it in Deuteronomy. Teach this to your children and your children's children. Your Jehovah the Lord saves. We understand that. It's not hard to find verse support for evangelism and reproducing reproducers. The distinctive, of course, is multiplication versus addition. But we do understand that we're to give ourselves away unless the seed falls through the ground and dies. Here's the general points regarding the 5 questions. Let me digress. Let me just give you the 5 questions real quick. We're going to end up addressing them personally. The first one has to do with evangelism. Who are you praying for to accept Jesus, and what did you do this week to interact with him? It's just a way to get my disciples and their disciples to be thinking about the lost, because he who wins souls is wise. And it's important that I be reminded and they be reminded, and we remind each other within the discipleship context of fathers and sons that the lost matter to God. Second question is, who are you currently discipling, and what specifically did you do to equip them with the Big Ten, to give them equipment, to sharpen their equipment, to sharpen their armor, so to speak. The goal there is that you're discipling and that you're equipping them in the Big Ten. Not just that you're meeting, not just that you're growing, not that it was a good meeting, not that we had good fellowship. We have learned over time that if we don't mandate thinking to equip them, then the time you are together is going to turn into fellowship about each other and your family and the things that are important to you, fellowship with God about spiritual things. There might be a prayer. There might be a devotional. There might be some Bible reading. But there very well is not something that equips them in the fundamentals so that they can be practiced, reproduced, and multiplied. This is what I found. So when I asked my disciples, how did it go? They said, good. What does good mean? We had a good time. We had sweet fellowship. Sweet fellowship is a good thing. But sweet fellowship is not sustainable and reproducible in terms of impacting future generations as much as compared to giving them tools, refreshing tools, talking about tools, being accountable to tools. So I want to know what my disciples did with their disciples this week or these last 2 weeks regarding the Big Ten, which are the tools that are sustainable and reproducible. I'm not interested in them growing in knowledge. They can do that on various ways alone and through outside resources and at the local church. At a discipleship level, I'm looking for them to serve each other in accountability, to grow in habits and disciplines that are going to help them walk with God, be with people, and have a plan to reproduce and multiply. The third question, similarly, is who are you considering as future disciple prospects? And what did you do to interact with them this week? Now, these 5 questions are very practical, and they're uncomfortable because they force a variety of interactions and thinking. And so at some level, I've found this to be one of the most critical of the Big Ten, because if they do everything else, at some level they stall unless they're praying for the lost and discipling and being mentored and thinking about growth and growing others. And so, again, through trial and error, certain things have become more prominent than other things. Obviously, all of the Big Ten are critical. But there's something uniquely powerful I found in regularly having in front of the table what actual interactions are we having and what are we doing when we're meeting together, versus hoping that it goes good and hoping that there's growth and hoping that reproduction is happening. These are questions that got to the heart of actual actions. And that's what we're looking for in this case, undergirded by prayer always. Fourth question is, who are your mentors and what did you learn from them in your interaction? We'll talk about that more specifically. And the fifth question is, who are your mentor prospects? Who's out there that you might end up meeting or having a relationship with or asking some questions, whether it's a relationship of depth or width. At least you're seeking somebody to help you grow in an area and you want to grow in. We'll talk about all of these more. But those are the 5 questions. Evangelism, discipleship, who are you doing and who are you seeking? Mentors, who are you meeting with and who are you seeking? This is what are the 5 questions. The general points regarding them to assist our understanding. Evangelism and discipleship are both matters of obedience. They are for all Jesus confessors. They're part of a healthy believer's daily life. Evangelism and discipleship are 2 sides of the same coin. We've addressed this previously. You can't separate a birth from a life, can't separate a wedding from a marriage. They must go together in union for someone to be a fully devoted follower of Jesus. It's the Great Commission lifestyle. We've said where there is discipleship, there will be evangelism. However, where there is evangelism, there may not be discipleship. That is a fundamental truth. And even as evangelism is focused upon and embraced and talked about and rewarded and it's measurable, it is not the be-all, end-all. Because somebody who's saved that does not stay in the faith is not a good plan. The 5 questions are part of the Big Ten, and they keep your disciple aware about the Great Commission lifestyle because it's being Deuteronomy 6. We're talking about it when we get up, when we lie down, when we go along the road. We're binding it to our foreheads and our hands by having it being a point that is emphasized as a normal expectation. There are no exceptions to this. If you want to be a professional Christian, I say that loosely, let me say it a different way. These are not for the professional Christians. This is for every professing believer. It's for all who profess, not for those who are in full-time ministry, not for those who are in paid positions, not for parachurch ministries, not for Christian leaders. This is not for the professional or the vocational Christian. This is for all professing believers. Additionally, unless your disciples are pushed and you push yourself, remember the push-pull. When I push my disciples to stay engaged in evangelism discipleship, it convicts me to do so also. I lead the way, I go first, I go further. They see that, that's the modeling part. We interact about it. I watch them do it, I do it, they watch, they do it, I watch, they do it. We're going to get lulled to sleep regarding leading folks to Jesus and growing them up in Jesus, evangelism discipleship, if left to our own devices and if outside community. Now, you can have a church that never addresses this stuff, which means the chances are less the flock will. Or you can have leaders or disciplers who address this all the time, which increases the chance that the flock will. This is the option in a church community for this to become the culture. Where you have a culture of discipleship, you will have disciples making disciples. If you create a culture without disciples making disciples, the culture won't last. It'll bring at best generalized growth. But when you have disciples making disciples, you will have a culture as a byproduct of evangelism and discipleship. We emphasize the 5 questions so it makes a deep impression of the criticalness to your disciples, because you don't know if you're going to be with them for months or for years. But this needs to be a lifetime of lifestyle, and your emphasis will get rewarded, because what you focus on, you tend to do more. Of course, we're looking at discipleship as someone you are and not something you do. So one of the byproducts is that you make a strong impression on evangelism and discipleship being important when you address it regularly, whether that's weekly or otherwise. Excuse me. Evangelism can occur locally, meaning face-to-face, or it can occur from a distance. People can share their faith or lead others to the Lord without being physically present. Discipleship is a little distinct from that, because parenting happens in proximity. The best parenting happens under the roof, or at least near. Quantity of forceful relationship, intimacy over a quantity of time. When discipleship is done from a distance, it has limited value. That's why my contention is your father is going to be local. That doesn't mean that he doesn't travel. That doesn't mean that there isn't seasons. It does mean that they're basically localized enough that you can have regular communications. Of course, you can have regular communications through technology around the world, but there's something to face that everyone would agree is necessary in parenting of physical kids and also of your spiritual kids. In the general community, for discipleship to occur most effectively, it happens in a regular pattern, and it happens face to face. If it's a mentoring relationship, like an uncle or an aunt, that is less necessary to be localized, though always in person is better than distance. With mentoring, it's option. With discipleship or father, mother, it is mandatory. There are exceptions, but these are the principles. When addressing the issue of the 5 questions, these are some points that will assist in your understanding. Again, the difference between a discipler and a mentor is the difference between a father, mother, and an uncle and an aunt. A discipler is responsible, like a parent. An uncle and aunt, a mentor is available. They may do parental kinds of things, but that's not their responsibility. Coaching point. Your discipler is of the same sex. Men with men, women with women. That doesn't mean that men can't mentor women, and it doesn't mean that women can't be a mentor to men, just like we have aunts. And my aunt can at some point move the ball forward in my life, and so a woman could also. But intimate Q over Q relationship is going to happen, men with men, women with women. There may be exceptions that are linked with if you move into an area and don't have a discipleship culture, and there's a woman who's new to Jesus, or she's just come into the faith for a limited time, and specifically with clear boundaries, you may be somebody who moves the ball forward in her walk, or a gal in his walk, but you better have your antennas up to the devil who wants to steal, kill, and destroy, and would like there to be an inappropriate interaction, whether it's physically or emotionally, mentally. Some people call them soul ties, or even spiritually. With my disciples, I would say, do not get in a regular pattern of prayer alone with the opposite sex. The upside is not worth the downside of somebody falling in love with the other person. Even if it's in love with their heart, it's completely pure. They don't have mental and emotional bonds that are built. But spiritually, if somebody is walking with Jesus, it's attractive to the spirit of the other person. And thus, it may have an end that ends up being opposite of the desire. This is a principle. It's not a rule. It's not unbiblical. It is risky. It's not encouraged. And I think the Orthodox body would say, let's guard against that. Put parameters on it and make a different way. So if somebody does come to the faith of the opposite sex through you, whether you're male or female, immediately let's steer them to the same sex. If you're in a community of any kind of health, We can give her to another sister, a spiritual mother, a spiritual aunt. But as soon as possible, work yourself out of a job. There have been times for me when somebody has moved new to an area of an opposite sex, I stay engaged with them from a distance as I try to find a local church who's going to come alongside with them, or somebody non-locally who can come alongside them from a distance. It gets dicey when an ongoing relationship is built from a distance or locally, for sure, that is not sin, but is not sustainable without problematic considerations.